Recently, the Saudi Arabian government decided to buy everyone's favorite video game publisher, EA. And yes, it is that EA which is consistently voted as one of the worst companies to work for in the world. And yes, it is that Saudi government. And now they have become one. And this isn't some small, quiet investment in a mobile puzzle app that forces you to watch 57 ads to swap a single candy. They need to change that. No, it is not. This is an announcement, all cash, take private transaction valuing Electronic Arts, or EA, at an enterprise value of about $55 billion. $55 billion! That is more than the GDP of entire mid-sized countries. And to put that in perspective, $55 billion is enough money to buy every single avocado in the entire state of California and still have enough left over to fund a space mission dedicated entirely to launching a gold-plated life-sized replica of a loot box directly into the sun. It's an insane number, and it represents the largest all-cash leveraged buyout in history of all time. The previous record was $32 billion, and that was the price tag for the Texas utility company, TXU, back in 2007. So congratulations, EA, you are now officially more valuable and frankly, probably less useful to society than a reliable power grid for an entire state. So the primary funder of this transaction is the Saudi Public Investment Fund, or the PIF. The PIF is not just some guy named Phil with a high-interest savings account. It's a sovereign wealth fund, a massive, globally ambitious investment vehicle chaired by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS. And this is the same fund that has already quietly amassed a significant stake in EA, which was 9.9%. But now they're acquiring the whole thing with the help of Silver Lake and, yes, Jared Kushner's affinity partners. Because whenever you're talking about jaw-dropping sums of money in the Middle East, a Kushner is somehow legally required to be involved these days, hovering around the deal like an inexplicably wealthy garden gnome. Now, the PIF's total committed investment into the global gaming sector has now swelled past $38 billion, and that was the number before this acquisition. They now own stakes in a murderer's row of gaming publishers like Nintendo, Take-Two Interactive, which are the people behind Grand Theft Auto, by the way, and the mobile smash hit developer Scopely, which they bought outright for $4.9 billion in 2023. They've also snapped up the major esports tournament organizers ESL and Faceit, consolidating the very infrastructure of professional competitive gaming under one very wealthy umbrella. The Saudi government is essentially doing a surgical siege of an entire global entertainment industry right now. And why are they doing this? Why the sudden insatiable hunger for pixels and polygons? Well, the stated mission, codified under the catchy and somewhat dystopian name, Saudi Vision 2030, it's simple. Diversify the economy away from perpetually volatile, deeply polluting, and morally compromised dinosaur juice known as oil, and distract people with video games. So Vision 2030, launched in 2016, aims to transform the kingdom into a global investment powerhouse and a hub for technology and entertainment. They want to create 39,000 local jobs in the gaming and esports sector alone by the end of the decade, projecting that the industry will contribute $13.3 billion to the nation's GDP. Now, it's an admirable goal, but also a bit jarring, like watching your ultra-conservative uncle suddenly declare that he's becoming a TikTok dancer. And yes, I mean you, Uncle Jeremy. But the actual motivation, the real undeniable glittering reason for these multi-billion-dollar cultural buys is a concept you'd likely heard of. Sports washing. Except now, since they've moved from golf and football to simulated digital sports and fantasy warfare, we should probably call it cultural washing, I guess, or culture washing. You see, for decades, Saudi Arabia has been synonymous with, well, a few things, primarily oil wealth and a long list of human rights complaints that would make a medieval monarch blush. However, they've been aggressively trying to change the narrative through massive cultural acquisitions. It started famously in sports. The $2 billion launch of the controversial LIV Golf Tour in 2022, which poached talent from the PGA. There was also the 2021 PIF-led acquisition of the English Premier League club Newcastle United. There was the massive influx of cash into the Saudi Pro League, resulting in superstars like Cristiano Ronaldo signing with Al Nassr for a reported $200 million per year, and Karim Benzema joining Al Ittihad. They're also hosting the Dakar Rally and unbelievably are set to host the 2034 FIFA World Cup. The sheer volume of these events is meant to generate so much shiny, happy content that when you try to Google Saudi Arabia, the first suggestion is Saudi Pro League fixtures instead of, let's say, Jamal Khashoggi. And now they have EA. You know, EA, the company that releases a new version of Madden or EA Sports FC, also known as FIFA, every year for roughly the cost of a down payment on a small car, only to make the old version instantly obsolete. A ruthless, self-cannibalizing business model that makes a surprising amount of sense to a group funded by non-renewable resources with an expiration date. The acquisition of EA with its iconic IP, from Battlefield and The Sims to the cash-printing behemoths of Madden NFL and EA Sports FC, provides a direct pipeline into millions of American, European, and global households. It's an exercise in reputational rebranding, swapping the smell of crude oil for the intoxicating aroma of freshly unwrapped microtransaction loot. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the absurdity truly hits its high watermark, because EA has for years been widely criticized, even successfully sued, for its predatory monetization practices, essentially preying on gambling addiction via randomized rewards. And who is now in charge of that ethically questionable machine? A government that, according to Human Rights Watch, continues to repress basic freedoms. It's beautiful in a horrifying, car crash on fire kind of way. So we've established that Saudi Arabia's public investment fund has the kind of money that makes Scrooge McDuck look like he's running a slightly ambitious Kickstarter. But having just a huge pile of money doesn't make you an industry leader. It makes you a mark waiting for the next overpriced NFT scam. The PIF, however, has demonstrated a sophisticated long-term strategy for gaming, and it's led by a subsidiary with the wonderfully corporate-sounding name Savvy Games Group. Savvy Games Group was established in 2022, and it is the execution arm of the Vision 2030 gaming push. Their mandate is colossal. They announced a plan to invest a total of $100 billion, that's 100 billion with a B, across the entire gaming ecosystem, domestically and internationally. And they are quickly becoming the big fish in a small pond, or essentially the megalodon of the ocean. So let's look at the acquisitions that preceded the EA deal. They didn't just grab a publisher of console games, they started with the platforms that generated the most hype and platforms that captured the most casual dollars. So as mentioned earlier, they acquired Scopely for $4.9 billion in 2023, and Scopely is the publisher of giant viral games like Monopoly Go, which gives Savvy Games proven access to non-traditional gamers. Essentially, they acquired the customer that will happily spend $50 a week on their commute to unlock a new digital hat for their little game piece. Then they went after Japanese powerhouses like Nintendo and Capcom, and Nintendo and Capcom gives them street cred. But the purchase of Electronic Arts, the company that reported an eye-watering $7.5 billion in revenue in fiscal 2025, gives them the one thing they are missing: a powerful, established presence in AAA console and PC gaming. It plugs the final gaping hole in the Savvy portfolio, as its CEO Brian Ward previously admitted their lack of presence in console titles was a gap. Well, congratulations, Brian. The gap is closed with a $55 billion check, and now you own gaming. So the global acquisition spree is mirrored by a massive domestic construction project. The money isn't really leaving Saudi Arabia, it's being deployed to create a new economic reality back home, centered on the most ridiculous, ambitious construction project currently underway: NEOM. So NEOM is the proposed $500 billion linear megacity. And yes, maybe they'll have flying taxis and a fake moon, but it's also where Savvy Games Group plans to build its global headquarters. The futuristic dystopian marvel is slated to feature a dedicated gaming hub, attracting international developers and nurturing local talent. It's intending to produce over 30 globally recognized large-scale games by 2030. So when you consider the EA acquisition, you must see it through the lens of NEOM. This is not just some quiet investment in a company based in Redwood City, California. This is about teleporting EA's decades of institutional knowledge, its game development pipelines, and its prestigious IP directly into the heart of a Saudi-funded, tech-driven desert metropolis. They are using the weight of their immense capital to buy cultural authority, transforming the country from an oil producer into a content producer. It's an extremely aggressive, calculated move to shift the country's global image from a place you read about in the newspaper's international section to a place you read about in the patch notes for your favorite annual sports simulator. And that truly is where the brilliance lies. Because if they can make you think about Madden first, they win. But the question remains, what does winning look like when the prize is the most despised video game publisher on Earth? And so we're going to take a look directly at EA's greatest, most lucrative sin. So what is it? Is it the time that they patented the concept of advertising in video games back in 2008? Was it the time they accidentally released a full game update that replaced all the players in Madden with various species of garden snail? No, I wish that were the case. Their great sin, their beautifully ugly $55 billion crown jewel, is the loot box. Loot boxes, or what they call it in their financial reports, extra content, which is kind of a bit like calling fentanyl an extra nap aid. They're the true engine of this entire transaction. EA is not a company of selling $70 discs anymore. EA is a company that runs on a virtual gambling machine. They don't want your one-time purchase. They want your perpetual, desperate subscription to the idea of winning a better digital football player. And so the statistics on the loot boxes they're pretty horrifying. So in fiscal year 2024, EA reported that its live services and other segment accounted for a staggering 73.17% of their total net revenue. 73%. That's not a side hustle anymore. That's the whole damn business model. That means for every $1 you spent on a full game download, you spent almost $3 on a randomized digital chance at glory. Whether it's getting a new rare icon card in EA Sports FC or a new piece of pastel furniture for your sim to ignore in The Sims 4, that's what the money's going for. That's how the company makes their money. And the real king of their revenue is actually FIFA, or EA Sports FC Ultimate Team. Essentially a game mode within the soccer game. In fiscal year 2021 alone, before the name even changed of the game, that one game mode generated $1.62 billion in extra content revenue. That's more money than some cable news networks make running their entire 24-hour cycle of manufactured outrage. EA has created a system that is so effectively addictive that multiple governments, actual legitimate governments, have tried to intervene only to realize the legal framework for "is this fun or am I ruining my life?" is still evolving. The European regulatory response is a masterclass of just government incompetence. The Belgian Gaming Commission in 2018 declared loot boxes illegal gambling under their existing statutes and demanded their removal from the games. The Netherlands Gaming Authority followed suit. What was EA's response? Did they suddenly discover morality? No, they did not discover morality. They simply disabled the ability for Belgian and Dutch players to purchase randomized currency, instead changing the mechanics slightly or pulling the games from those markets entirely. It's a textbook example of corporate accountability. When faced with a law, you don't comply, you just move your digital drug cartel 2 doors down and offer free shipping to its neighbors. Now, EA's executives, before the sale was announced, had to answer to Wall Street every single quarter. They had to disclose their 10K annual reports or their 10Q quarterly financials to the SEC. Although Trump is trying to change those things right now. But Wall Street, while happy to bathe in the revenue, still demands perpetual upward growth. This creates pressure to release half-baked games, over-monetize the good games, and generally behave like a company that's constantly running from an axe murderer, which is perhaps how they ended up with their infamous 2012 consumerist title as the worst company in America. And they did it twice. But that might be part of the reason why this $55 billion take-private deal was so attractive to EA. This isn't some venture capital which wants a return in 5 to 7 years. This is a sovereign wealth fund. This is a patient version of money, funded by the absolute certainty of oil revenue, and they can wait. They don't have quarterly shareholder calls where some aggressive hedge fund manager demands to know why Madden's profits only went up 11% instead of 12%. They now own the entire machine, and they can turn the dials for maximum long-term extraction without a single journalist or financial analyst being able to look under the hood. this could be really good or it could be really bad. The Sims, the unholy digital dollhouse that has been running the expansion pack racket since the year 2000, I mean, if you bought every piece of DLC ever released for The Sims 4, you'd spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars, which could be enough to buy a decent used car, or fund approximately 3/4 of a week's worth of Jared Kushner's travel expenses. Now, their catalog of games is reliable, it's perpetually monetizable IP, Madden, Battlefield, EA, The Sims. They're all recurring revenue streams. They're not gonna vanish until the sun eventually swallows the earth or an asteroid hits us. So this is also a very low-risk investment. However, a lot of governments and a lot of journalists and reporters have a lot of worries that are coming from this transaction. So as already mentioned, now the Saudi government owns the game Battlefield. Essentially, they own the developer DICE, who's the one that makes the game. And keep in mind, Battlefield is a franchise built on depicting Western military action, often set in the Middle East, occasionally engaging in the kind of heroism that might be slightly less palatable when the parent company is from the Middle East. So Saudi Arabia now, as mentioned, already owns The Sims and their studio Maxis, and a game that at its core is a deeply personalized, often subversive mirror into Western domestic life, allowing players to explore fluid sexuality, unconventional lifestyles, and architectural designs that would likely be flagged for review in certain parts of Saudi Arabia. And so there is a lot of worries about maybe some of these outside influences will now be seeping their way into these games. And it might be subtle at first. I mean, look at China. For decades, Western media companies have bent over backwards to localize content for the Chinese market, a process often involving aggressive self-censorship to comply with government regulations. Characters that reference Taiwanese independence, they disappear. Storylines that touch upon human rights abuses, they're erased. This is the explicit trade-off. Access to a massive market in exchange for compliance with cultural and political red lines. So now think about this with Battlefield. When a studio like DICE begins developing the next Battlefield, will there be an implicit quiet instruction from the Savvy Games Group headquarters in NEOM that perhaps the villain faction should not look vaguely like the Saudi National Guard? Will the maps set in vast, wealthy desert cities conveniently fail to include any sensitive political or cultural references? Historically, the game industry has localized for language and region. Under this new ownership, we are watching the potential for localization for ownership in politics. And will this happen to The Sims 5 if that ever comes out? Will there be things that have been in the game that are lifestyle options that are gonna suddenly become inappropriate or banned from the game? But one thing I thought about is this. This might be the true genius of it all, the true cherry on top of this disturbing sundae, is that out of all the companies that Saudi Arabia chose to buy, they chose to buy EA, a company that was already perpetually publicly hated by its own consumers for its greed. When you hear a gamer complain about their favorite franchise has been ruined, will they blame the Saudi ownership? Probably not. They will blame the exact same company that they have been blaming for the last 15 years. EA ruins everything, they'll scream into their microphones. And the PIF, watching from their magnificent mirror-lined fortress in NEOM, will simply shrug, safe in the knowledge that they bought the perfect scapegoat, the perfectly hated shield. And while the angry gamer focuses on microtransactions, the geopolitical objective of establishing Saudi Arabia as an unblinking, unquestioned global hub of digital entertainment has been quietly, ruthlessly, and expensively achieved. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please check out my documentaries playlist, and just make sure to click on that, and I'll see you guys in my next video in that playlist in just a few seconds.